This episode of our This Week in XR podcast is sponsored by Zapper. Zapper is one of the world's leading XR companies. Over the past 12 years, they've won numerous awards for memorable campaigns. They've democratized AR by making tools and SDKs that anyone can use. And they created ZapBox, the world's most affordable mixed reality headset. Most recently, Zapper worked with Unilever to create an enhanced QR code called Accessible QR, which enables packaged goods to speak to the blind and partially sighted. If you're thinking XR, give the team at Zapper a call or visit zapper.com to see how they can help you on your XR journey. Good morning, everybody. It's the AI XR podcast with Rony Abovitz, Ted Chilowitz, and I'm Charlie Fink. It's February 7th, 2025. Good morning, guys.
Good morning. How are
Morning.
you?
It's been an interesting week in the news. Everybody is reporting earnings. Outlook from the big companies, a little bit pessimistic for the rest of 2025. I think when you have two boom years, you can't expect it to go on indefinitely. So I think they're all kind of hedging their bets a little because they've grown a lot, particularly in revenue. And it's just, there's a finite amount of dollars to vacuum out of the world. When you get to be the size of AWS, they've already eaten, 60% of that industry, and they're competing against the biggest companies in the world. So
Yeah.
Anyway, interesting. Lots of stuff came out. Apple and Meta had some big reveals this week, strategy reveals, not financial reveals. Apple, I do not understand what is happening in Apple XR. They're canceling AR glasses, which is like the only thing that's working. And they're, thinking that enterprise is going to catch on with the Vision Pro. I don't know why, I guess, because I have no idea why. The HoloLens tanked. Microsoft put $50 million into it, $100 million into it. So I don't know why Apple thinks
Billions.
they're going to
Ask
succeed
Rony.
there. Go ahead.
Billions,
Many
not
billions,
billions.
many billions. Yeah,
Many billions.
Microsoft did?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
billions and
So, and
billions.
and so the whole thing came to a screeching halt, and Microsoft just walked away, pretending it never happened. I wonder if Meta will do that ultimately.
I wonder if the AR glasses is a red herring from Apple. Like, did they ever fully confirm they were making them? And now do we really know that they're not doing them? It's not like they shipped anything. It's not they
Right.
announced anything. It's just like noise in the rumor mill. But like you're right, it's the most viable version of all of this. Why would they not do that? It's the most Apple of all the things possible.
I mean, you want to talk about something that could sit in the middle of their ecosystem with, by the way, with or without a display, because now I think we're talking about sensors and AI being the most critical part of it. Whereas before, the amount of friction and technological barriers to having a display were unachievable with today's technology. So, and that is saying something. So the glasses seem to be kind of a jumpstart for all of that, and would suffice for years, if not indefinitely. They do have now, I will say, Apple patented, you remember this a couple months ago? They patented earbuds with sensors in them.
Mhm.
So maybe they are thinking about that, but just not in the way that we would.
Well, as someone who has lived deep inside Apple culture for many multiple generations now, which is sort of terrifying to say, um, Apple never really leaves a sector. Apple studies, noodles, compares, and the thing that Apple does potentially better than maybe any other platform company on the planet is they study the human connection to technology. And they know when they need to slow their roll and they know when they need to increase their trajectory. And I think more than anything, Apple can watch an entire sector. And, I've talked a lot about this on the podcast about virtual reality, mixed reality leans towards the exotic, right? And exotic tends to lean toward low volume, high intensity, very specific use cases around certain sectors, which is typically not Apple's MO, right? They'll stay in an ecosystem as part of that, as in like professional applications and things that they touch, but it won't be the mainstay of their world. So I think my thought process on this is they are not leaving the game. They are just watching what the game is and figuring out how to best play inside that game. Kind of like they did, to your point, with anything related to how they bring something to your ears, right? Many generations, many iterations of various headphones, mostly wired for many, many generations. The simplest, just include it with the iPhone, right? Until they realize there is a market and a sector for this at the right evolutionary point. And that took many, many, many years. So I think you're going to see the same thing on the visual
Oh,
side. But
but
I would
Ted,
not count them out of this game, and I don't think Rony would either.
no, let me just add, I think, look, we're called AI XR. I think it's super obvious to them and others in the field that there's a really good nexus of personal AI sensing you and the earbuds and glasses that you're going to wear that just provides this whole connective framework and probably some watch or some phone thing in your pocket, right? It's very obvious. The question is like, what piece of technology has got to be at what level for it to be hundreds of millions? And I think they're just trying to pace that.
Yeah, I agree.
And then, so I think I know the rumors from our perspective, I think as a podcast, I think you guys would agree. You have to think, I think, Ted, you nailed how they think.
Well, we've been doing this for 5 years, so 5 years from now, I guess we're going to find
Take
out.
another look see.
You
Mark your
certainly,
calendars for
as a
2030.
as a writer, let me add, if I could make this shit up, I would be writing fiction. But I can only watch the big boys play and from the outside try and guess what is going on with the thinking.
I mean,
Speak.
truthfully, I think the meta trajectory is kind of the more interesting story. The amount of spend, the fact that they are seeing a return on investment in the billions, but that is nothing compared to the loss that they take quarter over quarter over quarter, exponentially raising and never really finding anything that completely locks in, beyond the fact that they've sold a good amount of these all-in-one wearable devices, the Quest 2, the Quest 3, and potentially a Quest 4 that will come out. And the Ray-Bans are doing relatively well in the marketplace, right? And there's a big Super Bowl ad so
Well,
they're entering the mainstream.
right, but I mean, they've sold 1 million of them. It
Mhm.
sounds like a lot, but it's not a
No, it's
lot
a loss, right? It's a
relatively.
loss sector.
And they
Yeah.
spent $100 million doing it through marketing and television and the Super Bowl and opening retail pop-ups around the country or LA and Miami and they're everywhere.
Can you think of any other compute platform or technology platform, the two of you, that has continued to spend so much dollars and resources into like for what are we talking, 8, 9 years now? They're in this game.
Oh, more since
More
20,
10,
I think
2012,
since
2013.
yeah,
2014, right?
2012,
Okay,
Yeah.
so
2012,
12
yeah.
years, call it 12, 11,
Yeah.
12
I
years.
mean, Meta's approaching 100 billion, whether it's 90 something, but I
Mhm.
just think let that only Meta is approaching 100 billion on Reality Labs,
With
not
effectively a
even
90% loss on
including,
it. Yeah.
oh, way more. I'd say like 95,
I
96%
I
loss.
honestly think the way things are going, Meta may just spin it off or walk away. Its core business and its valuation would not suffer. They would get a bump in their
I
valuation.
can't see Mark doing that though. I think like Google will do that. I think Google will close and shut and close and Apple will do that. But I think Mark is obsessed that this is the future. And I think he's
Still, I don't know. Because of AI and everything that's happening, I don't know. Maybe.
It's
He just
fascinating
put
to
on
study.
another necklace like he found a scalp. I mean, he hasn't said, all right, well, you're right, I think. I mean, human nature, in this case, may have more to do with it than any kind of business context. So,
I'm going to say this, like if you look at the history of PCs, there was like breathing moments of just blah land. Like when Steve Jobs left Apple, there was this period of like blah, and
The
then
gateway years,
yeah.
yeah, it was just like, well, it was
the
just like
compact years.
yeah, and then a confluence of things started to come. The web, the internet started to get better. Apple revived again, like the
Well,
mid
and Google
'90s.
came along.
Google. So it's kind of like I feel like we may be in that like I don't know weird kind of moment of everything, right? Because there was this huge burst, like AI is everything, right? But our periods of like walking in the desert and going to the oasis, they're not like 10 years anymore. It's like 2 days. Like everything is one thing, and then like R1 comes along, and then everyone forgot about R1 already.
Yeah.
It's like, I mean, things are so like short twitch neurologic bursts. Like, 1 week is like what used to be a decade.
Interestingly, Google is about to go through another round of layoffs. This one pretty straightforwardly because of the efficiencies of AI. It makes better programmers more efficient. They need less help. So if you are not one of those senior programmers benefiting visibly from AI and introducing it into your workflow, voluntary buyout might sound good because they know who they are.
Yeah, that's going to start to happen. I think it's some attrition rate, which all these companies think that you can just kind of sneak in quarter by quarter, year over year, like a certain percentage, but just don't rehire back. So the ratio of people to AI systems, like in 5 years, will be like, how did that happen? I just think they're just going to shed, they're just going to shed people. And as AI systems get better and better, they're going to shed more and more people. And this is going to quietly happen. And you're starting to feel like Starbucks with all kinds of baristas that have PhDs. It's going to get very interesting. Where are these people going to go? This is the universal basic income question. Like, if you do that paradigm in AI, what are we doing with all those folks?
Yeah, and then the flip side of that argument is every technological advancement increases an employment base, right? I mean, the computer industry at large is the perfect example of the fact that that was not an industry 60 years ago, right? And then the mainframes came, and you have a certain amount of employees that need to run and maintain mainframes and a very tiny amount of engineers that figured them out. Then the personal computing revolution happened, and now you have hundreds of millions of people, an ecosystem working within that sector, right? And then as these various forms of compute, tablets, mobile, various, point of purchase item, everything, banking, every industry runs on a compute infrastructure, right? Media. And now you have many, many, many hundreds of millions, actually billions of people across the planet Earth that work in a computer industry that simply did not exist in any way, shape, or form in the 1940s and 50s, right? Not all that long ago. So the interesting open question is, in the 2040s, 2050s, 2060s, will you have, like, if the population is 11 billion people on this planet as opposed to wherever we sit now, 8 point something, are a billion or 2 billion of those working in some sort of man-machine compute interface that we now typically call AI, um, that has exponentially increased that sector by 2x, 3x of an employee base. And the idea that people are working in this sector actually grows exponentially. I don't know the answer. That's the two sides of the coin, right? And there's a sort of historical proof point that historically new industries that are more technologically advanced add larger and larger employee base. Just look at all the people that work in the automotive industry that focus on compute systems inside automotive cars, right? Inside that industry. Where in the days when we were kids and our dads drove Mustangs and Oldsmobiles, there was no compute in the car, right? It's all just mechanical analog stuff, right?
I kind of
Including the
miss those
radio.
cars. I think a lot of older people miss those knob-driven
Yeah.
interfaces.
But
So
that's
Charlie,
that's within our lifetime, right? And within one lifetime, we saw a non-compute universe to a compute universe that employs a massive amount of the human planet.
And computing has already displaced a lot of jobs. And I think, as you're saying, those jobs are going to be shed. Self-driving cars and trucks are going to be a reality. So where are the people in that industry going to go? I hope they don't become the responsibility of you and me, and obviously the government, because that's what they're hoping, obviously, that there's replacement work and replacement jobs. Um, I mean, we'll see.
I mean, if you go into any
I'd say
fast food restaurant, right? You go into McDonald's today, a modern McDonald's, it is effectively a robotic operation, right? There's touch screens, you self-order, there's less employees, and you pick up your food and you go, right?
So that's a machine replacing a job few people really want to do.
Really want anyway. Right, right, right.
So our guest today is Sean Mann from RP1. This is a company with a Metaverse browser. It's a very revolutionary idea, whose time perhaps has come. So let's bring in Sean. He is the CEO. I did he was on us this week to do a demo before his appearance on the show. So last night I was lucky enough, I published my column and we squeezed it in. And I have to say, it was one of the more interesting and exciting things I've done on my Quest 3 in quite a while. So thank you for that experience, Sean, and thank you for joining us on the show today.
You know what? Thank you so much. I'm super excited. Obviously, legends in the space, and so I'm honored to be here.
Well, and I've
John, I
spent
have a
some time
question
with
for you.
Sean
Oh,
in person a few times in headset, looking at his various progress, making progress with the platform, and we've always had really interesting conversations about it and where it's going and how you're proceeding. So it's going to be great to get an update.
Sean,
Oh
before
yeah.
we get into any of it, I have a question for you. What's this whole metaverse thing? I really have no idea what it is.
Well, you know what's funny?
Doesn't it have something to do with Web3 and crypto?
It's
I
become
think
actually,
is it like Bitcoin? Is metaverse like Bitcoin or something?
Okay,
I think
boys,
it's like
stop
blockchain,
teasing.
actually.
you know
It's
what?
social, local, mobile.
It's become an adjective, which is probably the biggest problem because now it's being used to just describe anything and everything that has any technology attached to it or buzzwords. But that's actually, I think, the problem. Like, if we don't define what we're heading towards, how do we actually collectively work together,
So,
right?
okay, so this is like you get on the show, you know everybody, a bunch of guys, and the first thing we do is start giving you shit.
Yeah, totally. I love it. I love it.
It's like Joe Rogan, right? It's like
Right, exactly. So, fortunately, I think we have a slightly different audience than Joe. But first of all, let's talk about just the base level. What is a metaverse browser,
Okay.
and what platforms can use it, and how?
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily trying to get platforms to be able to use it because I think we're going, if we take a step
Well,
back.
let's say just browsers to use it.
Yeah. I think if you think about the history of software, I think one of the greatest inventions of software was the modern day browser, the web browser. And if you think about what it's done, is connected the entire world's population with content. It's created interoperability and it's created full extensibility where anyone could be any component. They could be the tools, they could be the WordPress, the Canva, they can create plugins. It's endless as far as how they can participate as an ecosystem. And if you think about before the browser, we were stuck in walled garden platforms like the AOLs and the CompuServes, and it really controlled our view into the internet without really giving us the freedom of the web. And so the invention of the browser was probably, I think, one of the biggest things mankind has created because of what it's done to accelerate not only sharing, but these social connections and everything imaginable that we just take for granted today. We grew up with it, right? We were born with this browser and it allows us to do lots of amazing things. And when we started our company, we started it with game-changing technology. No one knew. Everyone thought the metaverse was 30 years away because how do you put a billion people in a single sharded ecosystem? And so everyone just started thinking about the federated metaverse, which is like get a whole bunch of smaller boxes and figure out how they can connect each other and build bridges and figure out how to interact. Bring these platforms together, which I think is a challenge. It's kind of like getting AOL and CompuServe to agree to share. They don't have a business reason to do that, and so they've created these walled garden platforms, which I think are amazing. I mean, I'm not knocking them. I think they've really shown us amazing experiences, what is possible, but it hasn't really opened it up to the masses to really participate at a level that we all want to see happen, right? And so when we thought about the browser, which is all HTML based, it's really not designed from the ground up to support what we believe is the future of the spatial internet. And the one thing that people are not really talking about is I believe the future is millions of real-time services. And what I mean by that is you're going to be able to connect to any third-party service that now has to be injected into the browser and run in real time based on your proximity or the experience that you want to create. And so we started, as we built this demo to showcase our scaling technology, which is amazing. I mean, we can have hundreds of thousands of audio tracks using very few computers. We can scale to billions of people in a single sharded architecture. We actually figured out we were actually building the beginning of a browser that is for on-demand content for 3D immersive experiences. Really, it's going to circumvent the entire App Store and other platforms to allow an open spatial internet or an open spatial web or a metaverse-like content to be able to be streamed in real time, which I think is extremely important.
So Sean, a lot of our listeners have spent a lifetime or part of a lifetime in virtual reality in some fashion, right? We have like Charlie said, we have a tuned audience that kind of explores this stuff and lives this stuff, and the three of us have do it all along. So maybe level set for our audience as to what you're doing that differentiates from things like Second Life that they know of, and like what they did with, Linden Labs, which was the Second Life kind of entity that started this thing called Sansar, and it didn't quite hold. I think they might have exited or spun it off. And then how do you differentiate from WebXR, which is out there as kind of a immersive browser in various ways, and it's used in lots of ways. Give us sort of your point of view and what makes your system and platform different than those things.
Yeah. So I think it's I think a lot of times we get bogged down in technology and we try to solve something that we don't maybe comprehend what we're trying to solve for a future. And I like to work ourselves back, because what we've taken a lot of time in our company is to really think about what does the future look like. And if we take away even VR alone and just start talking about AR, because I think that will help connect the VR component. We believe that you'll seamlessly, an AR glasses will seamlessly connect to a browser and instantly stream to you on-demand AR content as you roam around the real world. And so as I walk into a university, I will connect to their map and it will automatically connect me to real AR applications based on my proximity. And so maybe it greets me and says, "Hey, where's my classroom?" And I'll say, it'll draw a digital line on the physical floor to help me find my classroom. Or if I walk near the library, I'll connect to a different AR app that they've created that helps me find the book that I want on which floor. It really is endless as far as how you can start connecting these components. And when you think about that, these are all going to be in the form of services that are running off of different software built by somebody in the world, individual or companies. And so it's not about comparing, I guess, to a Second Life, which I think, by the way, is amazing. They've created an amazing community and people that want to be together. We're creating an ecosystem that allows people to build software to be seamlessly shared on demand from any device. And so if you walk around the real world, you have to be able to connect to a spatial fabric that allows you to instantly know where you're at in the real world. But more importantly, if I can't be there in real life, I should be able to put a VR headset on and get as close to reality as possible. And more importantly, these two things have to be on the same, in my opinion, browser, because someone in VR now can show up in your AR glasses, similar to what we did with Charlie yesterday, where he has a pass-through device. And literally with one click of a button, I am instantly in his living room having a full spatial audio conversation. And imagine that we can now play the game of chess, or we can get on a whiteboard, or we can do millions of things. Now the value of all this XR technology becomes eminent to actually pass up a cell phone. And see, you have to solve a reason to want to use these devices versus saying, "Hey, these are just a 3D monitor for 2D information." And so think of it more of a software that connects the world's population, not a single area for a single interest, if you want.
So would you say you're trying to build more of a spatial open source operating system rather than a walled garden? Like everyone's built an operating system. Well, four giant companies have built an operating system, right? And two exist and own the entire mobile ecosystem, both Android and Apple, right? And then there's Windows and Linux, right? And maybe a couple of others that don't really add up to much. And WebXR is sort of based on PC architecture, right? But your approach is different in some fashion. I mean, are you leveraging all of those existing operating systems and living on top of them, or are you building your own completely bespoke operating system?
Perfect question. I'll answer both pieces. I think the word extensibility is vital for our industry to thrive. If we're going to wait on any single platform to build all the pieces and components and software and all things necessary, it's going to take 50, 60 years to get to any point that we'll all be excited about the technology. And when you open it up to the web where anyone could become the WordPress, or anyone could build an identity component, or anyone could build an avatar system, we're just putting the starting the conversation on open standards where all of these will be interoperable with each other. And that opens up the creator economy, which everyone wants. If everyone goes in their separate direction, it is going to be an absolute, it's like the thousand internet problem, right? If you were to
Yeah.
create 1,000 internets with 1,000 different software and 1,000 different things, it doesn't make it easy for the masses to join. But the neat thing about the browser is a consumer just connects to the browser and they're instantly streaming this on-demand content. And
Yeah, I mean, in the realm of the 2D web, the historical 2D web that we still live in today, the evolution of HTML became that sort of interoperable. You can load pretty much any browser, any modern browser on either a PC or a Mac or even a Linux device and open up websites across the board. There are certain extensions that still don't work even to this day, and things that sort of, the Google camp is trying to force you into their world by saying, please use Chrome for all these things. Apple is saying, please use Safari for all these things. And then there's Firefox saying, we're independent of all that and we can, live as a third choice, and doesn't track your data quite as much per se. But I guess I'm trying to get to what the sort of differentiator is that you're working on compared to what those guys are working on, because they all have kind of a web extension, right? They have a spatial touch point. I don't think it's been adopted that widely.
yep.
But like, there's insane amounts of YouTube 360 video that is cross-platform, right? That opens up on
Yep.
whatever device you happen to have. So it's kind of an interesting space.
So we've created a prototype browser, Metaverse browser, using WebXR because it was the easiest thing for us to showcase it to the world. We do know that once we get enough funding, we need to build a native browser
Mm.
that does the same thing because we're going to be able to up-level the graphics. I mean, the native browser is no question that it's going to be 10 times more efficient than using it on WebXR, which has its limitations, right? And so, we started with WebXR just because it's easy touch point because everyone knows how to use a current browser, and then they can get into our browser through the current browser, which takes on a whole new life. And the differentiating factors are, and if you come into our demo, one of the first things that you'll see is that you have a fully contiguous, unlimited map size. We have a digital twin of our entire planet, one-to-one scale, including our entire solar system, and can scale it completely outside for anything you want to build that has nothing to do with a digital twin of our planet. And I think this is vital to have that picture in our minds of AR glasses walking around and instantly connecting to things. It needs to know spatially where you're at and instantly give you spatial assets and content and software, which then takes it a whole nother level than some of the other platforms and things that you're describing. It's really hard if you want to try to force immersive applications in the current browser, because I don't believe the experience is what is necessary. If you want to go to a web page, a 2D space to connect to a 3D space, and then come back to a 2D space to go to another 3D space, you really don't have that connectivity and interoperability as you move around seamlessly. And I think as people come into our demo, they're like, how is this possible? How can we seamlessly walk in one area, fly up to space, and now go to a game that's in a completely other area, all on demand? And I think right now, the most of the things that we see today are the blockbuster, right? Everything is a downloaded, pre-compiled app that takes time to get into. So you're basically moving from pre-compiled box to pre-compiled box. We believe the browser eliminates the box. It is a completely open fabric that allows anyone to connect services. So you as a website builder or a spatial builder, you'll get your own space and now connect to an endless amount of third-party services that help you describe or do the things you want to do, whether it's education, a game, or anything imaginable.
All right, Rony and I have a bunch of questions.
Okay.
Rony, go.
So Sean, do you see yourself as like what Ted was talking about, like the Mozilla Firefox of the space? Because if you remember the history with like Netscape, and then there was sort of like the open source folks. There's those, and then if anything becomes like real scale, like Apple, Google, somebody wants to come in and like just install it on all their devices and sort of dominate that way. Or are you hoping that one of the big guys likes what you're doing and says, "I like that framework, let's roll you in," and now you're
That's
part
what
of an
I was
Apple
going to
or a
ask.
Google?
Why can't it be integrated into Safari and Chrome as an extension or even as an invisible part of the browser?
I mean, there could be some type of fork, but the architecture is radically different than the current browser, right? The current browser is DOM based, it's HTML based. It wasn't designed to fetch 3D immersive applications. And they're doing their best to stitch and add components to give that immersive aspect, if you will. But I think from the ground up, it's not solving like the idea of the services. Like we've created a model foundation, a real-time API that's designed very specific for the browser to make it very easy for any company to inject their software into the browser. Those components are radically different than the architecture you're going to see in the standard browser. And so I believe trying to get things that are designed for the 2D space doesn't make sense to try to continue to add something because there's so much more that's needed for a real-time AR world to work. And I think starting from scratch, which we've done, really starts a true interoperable, not only conversation, but a seamless interaction. And the seamless interaction is by far the most important. I think people need to just connect to a device and instantly be 3D first versus worrying about how do I display 2D things? Because I don't think it's that magical. I mean, I think it's cool that something's floating in front of me, but I don't believe people are going to flock to buy AR headsets just to see a 2D screen in front of them. I think the spatial aspect is really the big game changer, right? That's the thing that I think every company should be focused on because that's a reason why someone's going to buy a $1,000 AR headset when they're available.
So let me just do the Professor Charlie thing for a moment, if I might, because you breezed past a lot of topics really quickly, and I think you may have left some of our listeners behind. So first of all, I'm going to explain what sharding is. I don't want you to explain it because it's going to take too long, and I want to talk about the browser. But
Yes.
a shard is an instance.
Mhm.
So the three examples of what I would consider to be proto metaverses, which is of course Second Life, which you mentioned, Roblox and Fortnite, and each of those has each experience you have on those platforms takes place in a shard, which is up to 100 people in that instance of the simulation. It's the system cannot tolerate more people. So when 27 million people wanted to see the launch of Travis Scott's astronomical album, they were in 270,000 rooms of 100. So that's what sharding is. Now, in the definition of the metaverse, everyone is available in real time in the physical world or the digital world.
100%.
Now, that was an idea in Snow Crash. It wasn't in Ready Player One, for those of you who are concerned about that. But in Snow Crash, if I'm wearing glasses, Sean could, using that browser, appear to be in my physical office. Its potential and its potential use case is powerful because we used to live in a synchronous world, right? To get Rony on the phone, Rony had to be at home. It had to be available. So that was the synchronous world that us old timers grew up in. And then along came the asynchronous world with email and messaging and so forth. And we got used to the convenience of that. But we still need synchronicity.
Yep.
So how do you reintroduce synchronicity in the context of a world that is asynchronous? And that would be the way to do it. Now, in terms of, so you mentioned two other things. One is a dumb question that I have, which is hosting. I'm assuming hosting works just like it would work with a website, whereas the owner of the website is responsible for their website and however it is hosted. Is that right?
Well, you get a little trickier because when you're trying to create a singular map, a massive unlimited map, just like I
Right.
can,
Maps was my next question,
I can
right?
connect.
Because it's
That's the second
whose
one.
map and where is the map introduced?
Yes. So we believe that there's something called a metaverse browser and a spatial fabric. And we talk about this on our white paper, which is on our website. And really,
And no one's going to read that.
I hope one day they will, because I think it's going to be important.
Well, I would say obviously engineers like to read that sort of
Yeah.
thing.
I'll read it.
Yeah, well,
I think a
engineers like to
metaverse,
read stuff like that.
a metaverse browser's job is to connect to a spatial fabric. And that spatial fabric's job is to handle a map, the audio, and 6DoF, and connect you with the basic principles of how to interact with this 3D content. And RP1 just so happens has technology that we believe no one else has on the planet that allows us to solve the sharding problem that you just described. And we believe for this technology to work, the whole purpose of the future of the spatial internet is to connect people better than 2D websites. And if you can only connect a small number of people and your data sits in that small number of people, it's very hard to seamlessly connect to anyone on the planet like we do with websites or cell phones today. And to me, it is a must to be able to seamlessly get inside of a browser, and it doesn't matter who is inside the browser. I can instantly connect with them with a phone call. So let's say Ronnie's playing a video game, and Ted, you're at a classroom at Stanford. You should be able to call each other and say, "Hey, come join me over here," and not worry about if you're on a different shard and our data and our ability to connect doesn't exist. And I think that is a really, really important phase. To answer your question with regards to the map, the purpose of what RP1 has done with our spatial fabric is we've created the first contiguous map that seamlessly connects you to all the content that is going to be uploaded on that map. However, we do believe there'll be other spatial fabrics. Like, so when you have your own home, you may have your own spatial fabric, and it should be designed for a browser to be able to read that spatial fabric. And that will control all your home automation or your toaster and your oven or your pool equipment. And when I walk into your house, just like when I walk in and I ask for your Wi-Fi password, I'll get your Metaverse password and I'll instantly connect to all your AR, services that are running inside your house. And that can be run on a separate spatial fabric that gives you the security that you're looking for. We're starting more of the public spatial fabric that connects this on-demand content, but we believe that we're starting a conversation that's going to evolve to really solve a lot of layers that you're bringing up.
Sean, what I want to throw something out for you to think about. I think the question's not going to be, are you right or directionally right? I would say that most folks in the field would agree with you. In fact, some of our listeners probably work at Apple or Google or Meta, and I think those are the ones you have to worry about, that you're directionally right, and they're like, yes, we will go do that. I think the tricky thing for RP1 is not that you're not right, not that you don't have good ideas. Let's say you're right and you've got good ideas. How is it that you as RP1 makes it happen? So I think the interesting thing, maybe talk a little bit about that, because I think you could be completely right, have the right direction, have a good white paper, and it's read by like 500 people at Reality Labs,
Yep.
everyone working on XR at Apple, the whole Google, Samsung, Qualcomm groups, everyone's reading it. It's like, oh, let's go do Sean's thing.
Yep.
And they're sitting on like hundreds of billions of dollars. So I think the key as a founder, as a scrappy startup, and I think a lot of our listeners like to hear, how do you beat those guys?
So I'm very
Being
lucky.
right. It's not that you're wrong. You're right, but how do you
Yep.
beat them, and how do you prevent them from like, yeah, Sean, we like that. Thanks for the idea. See ya, bud. Like, what is your view on that? How do you?
Yeah, so we're very fortunate, or I should say, I'm very fortunate to have a founder that has invented a technology. He invented something called a database that is absolutely revolutionary, and that's going to be our secret sauce, our trade secret that we're not going to share with any company. Everything else we're going to open standards and open source completely, which I think is vital. But the one thing we're going to keep under our vest is the database technology allows us not only to scale this uncharted world, which no one has shown that they can accomplish, but we can do it with 1,000 times less compute. And I think those two components allow us to have a massive head start on any company on the planet. I think a lot of people don't realize that if you're going to push 2 to 4 megabits a second minimum to every single user on the planet, and the sharding issue, it's going to be millions upon millions of not only servers, but they will never have the capability. I shouldn't say never. Hopefully we have a massive decade head start, but they would have to solve, how do you scale to have the seamless experience that you can get with our technology?
I will give you a piece of free advice, which is free, so it's
Please.
worth that.
Oh, thank you.
But I don't know if you know Herman Narula at Improbable.
Yep.
But Improbable has been chasing the idea of like infinitely scalable, virtual worlds. And you might find a common friend who is still independent and is still trying to make these things happen. So if you do have an interesting like algorithm and way to do things with compute, like, what Google did with their search engine, right? They did have something that was still kind of hard to crack
Yep.
20 years later. If you have something really cool underneath the hood, you may want to find some allies who also have an idea of like, how do we make that happen? And by the way, Google did beat other companies because their browser and what they were able to do was so much better. It was
Yep.
basically three guys. I know all three. They were investors in Magically, but like three guys sitting around as college postgrads, grad school, beat everybody, beat Yahoo, beat everyone with tons of money. So why? Because they were math geniuses and they had something cool under the hood. So if you do have something cool in the hood, I'd go get it out there.
So Ronnie, I would love your advice, because the way I wake up every day and I talk with the team and we sit and chat about like why us? Like why is it important? Because it shouldn't be just about a company. We're not looking to be the next Meta or the next thing. I think we're trying to solve the freedom of the open web, right? Or the spatial internet where we're heading. And I'm hopeful that, if you think about the creator economy, I think they're getting the bad end of the stick, if you want, with the current ecosystem. You get taxed if you're in an app store. You're restricted on what you're allowed to put in that app store. If you go to other platforms, if you don't like the avatars, you can't change them because that's how they make their money and that's how they support, their billions of dollars of running that company. And I'm hoping that the hundreds of millions of creators will care about what we're doing, because we're not looking to take any revenue or any data from any of the stuff that's created inside the browser. Just like when you build websites, you may pay a nominal fee for your domain space on a yearly basis. You may pay some hosting fees, but you basically control your destiny. And we believe that the next browser has to have those same properties. And so I'm hopeful that we can get the support from the community where we're not just selling out to a Meta or an Apple. And look, we have to, stay alive, as being a, entrepreneur yourself. We've been bootstrapped with 10 people and we have enough to keep going for quite some time, but not grow at the rate that we need to. And so we have a couple of cool strategies that hopefully will get us the capital to really run a lot faster and get this out there.
I would say this, and I think our
Capital
listeners
is usually
also
attracted to a business plan whose third act is you making a lot of money.
I think there's plenty of money to be made in the browser, that doesn't restrict taking away things from creators and companies that want to run their stuff on.
I'd say this shows because I see a lot of I'd call it the somewhat idealistic pro creator economy, open folks trying to do things in this area. For example, like Sean, I don't know if you've ever connected with Neil and Rebecca at Lamina One. As in Metaverse, Neil. But the reason I'm bringing that up is like they're very much of the idea that there should be a peer-to-peer world that is pro-creator.
Yep.
And not dominated by hyperscalers. And it sounds like you're very much like in that piece of the world. And their view is that the economics are going to come from a kind of underlying chain.
Yep.
Right. So so people can there will be an economy underneath that with its own coins, and it's not as fashionable right now to talk about that, but it's probably what will happen as all these things come around again, like Bitcoin's back again. But there probably is some kind of peer-to-peer crypto thing that allows an emergent economy, including your browser and including creator work, to like be distributed without a lot of these intermediary people. The problem is a lot of people have to hold hands together at the same time because the Rebel Alliance is all fragmented. It's just a bunch of small people all over the place. So like, I think if you want to be like the leader of the Rebel Alliance, you got to get them all together somewhere. Have like the Rebel Con in San Diego, like the day before after Comic Con or something. But like, I really did. There actually are all the pieces out there.
Yep.
They're just not stitched together. And the advantage like the giant companies have is there's like one commander in chief that just goes for it. So I think if you really want to make what you're talking about happen, you have to rally all kinds of little kind of like the end of episode 9, where they got all the folks together. They came out of the woods and they took down the Sith in the end. I just ruined the movie for folks who haven't seen it, but you probably get what I'm saying though, right?
No, 100%. Look, the Web3 has been kind of really kicked to death a little bit, more so because of the lack of utility. I'll be honest with you. It's become a collectible and a way for people to make quick money or lose a lot of money because they don't know how to play necessarily the collectible game. And I don't think it's really, other than stable coins, I don't think there's really been a great use, or I shouldn't say great use cases. They haven't been put into use cases in systems where it's seamless for people to use. And I think the power of the browser will enable definitely Web3 transactions to happen, but I don't think it should be necessarily mandatory either, right? I'm sure there may be people that build content and say, well, if you don't build it in Web3 content or on the blockchain, I'm not interested in going to your location, so I'll go over here. And that's a choice you can make. But I think Web3 should be used as a tool and a way to accomplish things, whether it's payment or asset collections or whatever the case may be. Is I think that's important. I agree with you. Listen, we are not looking to build this all on our own. That's why we actually created the white paper. And there's no way our team size can really level set the entire standards of the next spatial ecosystem. But I think we have definitely started the conversation in a direction that everyone can win if they join us. And like you said, it's hard to get certain Web3 technologies say, well, we're going to work with you guys. We have to figure out what are the standards of the browser, and then invite everyone to bring those components. And one of them that you actually bring up, which I think Lamina One has really set out to do an amazing job, is to control the identity piece. And I believe there'll be hundreds of companies like Lamina One that have created an identity component that stores your multiple personas, the assets you get as you roam around in this browser-based area. And that's not something RP1 is looking to build. And so we're not looking to build just about any of these pieces. I mean, we're literally truly trying to solve the problem of the browser. Of course, we're going to have to build some components until other people join us, but we want people like Lamina One to come in and say, okay, how do we make our identity piece work inside the browser? And then now as consumers come in, they'll be able to, get those components and whatnot. So we definitely want to work with all these people.
I know we're kind of getting to a point where we're going to wrap up. So let me ask one key core question that probably a lot of our listeners are thinking about, and then Charlie probably want the last word on it. If I was to put my investor hat on, right?
Yep.
And you touched on without, your secret sauce. So without revealing your secret sauce on the podcast,
Yep.
If I'm an investor and say, I want to keep progressing this forward into an anti-shard universe, right? Where it's infinitely scalable.
Yep.
And I know that my friends at Epic Games have been working on versions of this to keep adding more and more instances without having to break it apart. And Meta has approached this with various forms of engineering prowess and resources with their Meta Horizon stuff. And Google has approached it in various ways and, with WebXR and all these different things. Is this a demonstratable scenario now that you can say, okay, let me show you in a simulation how we can connect hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people within this instance today. And that's why you should invest in this, because this isn't just a thesis or a concept or a white paper. We can actually execute on this today. And I'll show you how many server instances we have to run and where our energy platform, our cost platform is.
Yeah, so we have a global demo today, and we're going to be launching it for the public, 24/7, probably in the next month or two, where you'll be able to go to rp1.com, click enter RP1, and instantly go inside the browser. We're also going to have our first vertical product, which is basically a Zoom-like competitor where anyone can create a room upwards of 250 people with full spatial audio, and you'll get your own link that takes you directly into the browser from any device with zero install whatsoever. And that gets people starting to use and understand. And then we'll have sample games and locations to go to that will prove out the scale. Yes, we can definitely show the scalability.
So fundamentally different than a VR chat, which is sort of doing that today, but with limitations, is what you're saying.
Oh yeah. No, this is a much larger system capability. We're running on roughly 30 computers. We're capable of about 100,000 concurrent users with that size of compute. And with appropriate funding, we can easily ramp it up to 1 million concurrent users, 10 million concurrent users. Obviously, there's a handful of things that we're going to have to do on each of those stages, but the hard work is done. The database itself is revolutionary. We can prove that not only in the gaming space on like single games, where our founder came from the gaming space and was able to put 100,000 poker players, instead of using 1,000 to 2,000 computers, he could do it on 1/10 of one server, and that's all provable. And so we're using that same technology to do the scale inside the browser. And so, yes, we can definitely not only prove it, but we're going to actually invite the world to come join and enjoy the interaction of the browser. And I think that's going to be a lot of fun.
Sean, it's great to have you on the show finally. This was long overdue.
Definitely.
For people who are interested in this technology and trying it out, what should they do? Can they sign up for your waiting list, your email list? Where should they go to do that?
Yeah, so you can go to rp1.com. We got really lucky with an amazing website with 3 characters. So rp1.com, and you can go to /learn, which has all of our deck. It has all of our technology background, both on the API, why we need a new API to make it really eloquent. We have information obviously on our database and other technologies. But you also you can sign up for our open houses, which are going to happen, I think, in about 2 weeks from yesterday. So we have another open house for a couple hours. We're going to invite people to come in and check it out. And then if they join our Discord, they'll start getting announcements on when we do a soft launch where we can get a good group of people, so we can start getting some of the little bugs from different devices because we don't have the huge QA team. And then we'll move to a full open demo where we're going to hopefully get a lot of press and people to actually funnel in. So rp1.com, I think, is the great.
I would encourage people to do the demo. I got sort of a personalized version of it yesterday, and it was very much a snow crash kind of experience, unique, combining the physical and the digital. So definitely put that on your list of things to do. It's the weekend. Have a good one. And we'll be back here next Friday. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sean. Enjoyed the
Thanks.
conversation.
Pleasure. Yeah, likewise. Great to see you guys.